I'm going to tell you a story. It's an old story. It's been told in many forms and fashion. You probably have even heard it. But today I'm going to tell you my version of it. There was a monastery that was in the middle of kind of a woods, and it was kind of up on a hill. It was just a beautiful, beautiful spot, beautiful building. Everything about it was serene and amazing. And in this monastery there lived 5 monks. And these 5 monks were getting old. They were in their 70s, maybe even approaching 80. And they looked at each other and they said to one another, "What's going to happen? Look at us. We're all old. There's no one to follow us. There's no one to keep our order going. What are we going to do?" Well, of course, this was a big concern for all of them. And on this particular wooded area where the monastery was, there was a hut, an old, kind of like a hermitage. And every month or so, a rabbi from the nearby village would come, and he would spend the day in the hermitage, and he would spend the day, meditating and praying and reading scripture and that kind of thing. And the monks, they kind of had a sixth sense about the rabbi, and when he was on their property in the hermitage, they would say to one another, "The rabbi's in the hermitage, the rabbi's in the hermitage." One day, the abbot, who was the head monk, said, "I'm going to go see the rabbi today. I'm going to go talk to him. I'm going to ask him. Maybe he has some advice as to what we might do to get our order going again." And so the abbot set off for the hermitage to meet with the rabbi. And he said, of course, to the rabbi, "Can you help me? Our order is dying. We just don't know how to attract anyone young anymore." And the rabbi, he scratched his head and he said, "I have the same problem." He said, "The young people, they don't want to keep the holy days sacred anymore. They don't really want to come to the synagogue like they once did. And so I think we share the same kind of despair." And so the rabbi and the abbot spent the day together. They read from the scriptures, they prayed, and they wept over the days that were gone, that they felt they could no longer recapture. At the end of the day, the rabbi said, "I must return to the village." And the abbot pleaded with him one more time, "Do you have any advice, anything that you could tell me that might be of help?" And the rabbi slowly shook his head and said, "I really don't." And as the rabbi turned to go, as he was walking away, he turned back to the abbot and he said to him, "One among you is the Messiah." And with that, the rabbi faded into the woods. The abbot went back to the monastery, and all the brothers gathered round and said, "What did the rabbi say? Did he have any good news? Did he have any advice for us?" And the abbot just hung his head and said, "He has the same problems that we have. He can't attract young people to the synagogue anymore like he once did. And so we spent the day in prayer and reading scripture and weeping." But he did say one strange thing as he was leaving. He said that one among us was the Messiah. They all looked at one another like, "Well, that is pretty strange." So they went about their separate ways. But they started having this internal dialogue in their heads, like, if one of us is the Messiah, then it must be the abbot because he's the oldest and he's the most pious and he's our leader. So it must be him. But then they thought, maybe it's Brother Timothy. He's always so kind and respectful of everyone. Or maybe it's Brother Michael. He's always there whenever you need him. But of course it couldn't be Brother Eldred. He's so self-absorbed he even worries about how his robe is pleated and hanging. But on the other hand, Eldred has this presence sometimes that's hard to describe. And so the brothers began to look at one another in a new way, in a new light, with much more respect. And they also began to look at themselves. Could it be me? Impossible. But, Maybe. So they treated one another and they treated themselves with more respect. Now, because they had such beautiful grounds where the monastery was, often families came and picnicked on the weekend. And the families came and they saw the monks, and they had seen them for years as they had come, and all they saw were these hunched over, old, tired men. But then they began to see something a little different. They seemed to be a little more erect. They seemed to be more interactive with one another. Something was going on. Something had changed. Some of the young men decided to approach one of the brothers, and he engaged him in conversation, and he found out that they weren't just stuffy old men. They had great wisdom and things to say, and they were even funny. They were even humorous. And after a period of time, one of the young men came and asked if he could be a part, if he could join the monastery and be their student. And so the order was saved for the future. This story is called The Rabbi's Gift.